everyone. Welcome to this edition of English Skills One, Literary Criticism. So, you know that do you know that there was a unique school of formalism that was prevalent during the American literary criticism period from the 1940s to 60s? And did you know that this particular movement received its title from John Crow Ransom's book? Arnyo, the Karyawa. You have to listen to Dr. Prasanth. Dr. Prasanth will give you a wonderful explanation of new criticism and its origin, plus how it developed. Dr. Prasanth, thank you very much for coming in. Over to you, Dr. Prasanth.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Premanand. Welcome back once again to our new edition of English Skills One, where we do the fourth semester English literature main paper, literary criticism. And we are on to the module 3, where we discuss the 20th century criticism. Only the major traits are discussed. You don't actually have to study a particular text or maybe an essay, but rather we tend to look at certain concepts, right? So without wasting much time, let us move to the main topics today. We need to discuss the origin and also the close reading as a method of evaluation, explication, terms like ambiguity, paradox, irony, tension, and 2 fallacies, intentional and effective fallacy. That is the syllabus for you. We will move to the first slide, origin. It's a unique school of formalism in America during the 30s and 40s, derived from the title of a book written by one of the critics who spearheaded the movement, called John Crow Ransom. You need to study this particular critic's name and also the book, which is not very difficult. It is titled as The New Criticism. Maybe Ransom meant to put forth the new criticism in the sense of the something that is new, modern in that particular respect. But then the label came to be posted as new criticism. So we have new criticism with N and C capital. So I've just, on my left, I have a small slide which differentiates the Russian formalism and new criticism, which are almost the same, 2 sides of the same coin, but there are subtle differences as well. So it was inaugurated by John Crow Ransom with this epoch-making book, New Criticism, published in 1941. The method of close reading, which was already there in the domain, it is not something invented by Ransom, but it was there propounded by I.A. Richards and William Emerson, who that ideas of Richards and Emerson deeply influenced, or maybe that has served as a kind of a catalyst to this particular group. And major writers are Cleon Brooks, Kenneth Burke, Wimsatt, Robert Penn Warren. Robert Penn Warren was a poet as well in America. Alan Tate, and they are the key figures. And we will have to discuss or maybe look into many of these writers in detail in our later slides. In practice, they experimented or expounded close reading of the text. They highlighted close reading of the text, meaning you have to read the text proper without any attention to the outside world, outside reality. So for them, only the text matters. Nothing outside the text matters for them. So they have rejected the socio-political reading, which we are more familiar with actually. See, when we introduce an author in the classroom, normally we say some explanation, or we tend to provide you with certain background information with respect to the age he lived in, with respect to the social culture he had or she had been in. So for new critics, nothing of this background information matters. They evaluate only the text. So you can just remember I. Richards' practice in the classroom, which he called practical criticism, that is providing students with only the poem without even the name of the author or the age in which he or she lived. So this is the background of new criticism. Treats a work of art as an independent unit. They look upon a particular work of art as an independent unit without any connection with the time or with the socio-political milieu or even with other works of the same writer, and no reference in terms of the author, time, cultural, social context, even genre, or even canon. Nothing matters for them. Literary criticism is a description and evaluation of its object, that is the text. So that is what Clayton Brooks has said. It's an evaluation of the text. So that is the basic idea new critics actually tend to put forward. New criticism, I am using NC as an abbreviation, but you are supposed to write new criticism in your examination paper. Do not use an abbreviation. I've just used it for the convenience. New criticism is a loose umbrella term extended to cover up a group of critics who have their own unique methods of evaluation. And don't be under the impression that new criticism, every writers practice the same idea. No. New criticism is a blanket term we use or an umbrella term we use to include certain writers together who are different in their perspectives. Don't think that all new critics believed in the same way. No. Ambiguity, that was the hallmark of William Emerson. Paradox is the hallmark of Clayton Brooks. Irony for Robert Penwarren. Intentional and effective fallacy for Wimsatt. So all these writers, in different ways, they were trying to put up the same idea in different ways. So that is why we bracket them together into one group called new criticism, to be treated collectively as each one of them made a common endeavor to trace the meaning of the text. So I think they are close to I.A. Richards' idea that language of poetry is different from language of science. Okay, and he also talked about two senses: emotive language and also referential or scientific language. So the emotive, so they were actually, new critics were actually interested in to find out one particular point or maybe the trump card they have that makes literary language something special. And why literary language is special then, or special from ordinary language? Because Emerson says it is ambiguity that makes the language different. It is a paradox that makes the language different. It is irony that makes it different. So different critics put forth different ideas that makes language or literary language special. So the idea behind new criticism or new critics is to find out the formula or maybe the quality that makes literary language somewhat special. New criticism was considerably influenced by Richards, Eliot, and F.R. Lewis. I made this point early. They came under fire from later theorists. After 1950, the movement called New Criticism was severely scrutinized for their apolitical, meaning they separated politics or social milieu from literature, and isolationist approach. Isolationist in the sense they isolated text from all other background to literature. New criticism attempted to promote close reading and took criticism closer to scientific and objective level. So this is one plus point. If you analyze the pros and cons of new criticism, I would say that the pro is they took criticism closer to science and objectivity, and con is that they were apolitical and isolationist. So these are the 2 points we would like to express at this point. Close reading or explication. This is the next point. What is explication? Is a detailed and nuanced evaluation and interpretation of a text to discover its multi-level meaning or many meanings and to access its value as a literary work. That is what close reading is all about. It is a detailed reading of the text to identify or discover the diverse meanings it carries. It's a close analysis of the linguistic elements of the text, including words and syntax. So how would you do that? If you cut off or if you just cut the background, all the background information, then only the text appears in front of you. You have only the text with no reference to outside world. Outside world in the sense there is no reference to author, there is no reference to the time, there is no reference to the what kind of category or genre this particular work belong to. No information at all. You only have the text. So if you have only the text, then the meaning has to come from within, not without. Okay. So what you do normally, you have to identify the words, syntax, figure of speech, and whatever is available within the text, because you have to generate all the meaning, all the information from within the text. So what do you do is they prescribe the methods of to understand the text closer and claims the primacy of the text over authorial intention. All these words you have to be very careful and you have to use these words. One, primacy of the text. Text is supreme. Text is number one. Authorial intention of the author, they neglected that. For them, author or his intention or her intention doesn't matter. Socio-political or cultural context, they rejected. So they rejected author, they rejected culture, politics, and even social information, because they believed in the primacy of the text. Text is number one. And explication is a word derived from the French phrase explication de texte, explication of the text. So explication is actually a French phrase meaning explication or explanation of the text. Attempts to reveal the meaning of literary text commenting on figure of speech, tone, setting, connotation, ambiguity, point of view, themes, contrast, paradoxes present within the text. So all these are within the text. So they formulate opinion or evaluate a particular text by looking at speech, figure of speech, tone, setting, connotation, and reject author, his time, socio-political milieu, and cultural context. So this is exactly sums up what is the new criticism all about. Now let us look into some of the practices. One, ambiguity. William Emerson, you have to remember all the names of these texts because you have to, I'm very sure you will get definitely short questions on the text. I mean, I have listed all these texts in my questions as well. William Emerson is 7 types of ambiguity. I have actually listed the 7 types of ambiguity here, but may not be spending much time on that. You can take a screenshot. William Emerson argues, published in 1930, argues that no specific or definite meaning is not possible for words as they denote as well as connote. This particular concept we will be explaining further later when we do Indian aesthetics. See, a word has 2 aspects. One is the denotation or dictionary meaning, the meaning of the word given in the dictionary. Number 2 is the suggestive meaning, meaning connotation. See, just for example, if you call Kochi, our Ernakulam, Kochi, as the Queen of Arabian Sea, if I use the word Queen of, or Kerala as God's own country. So God's own country is a connotative, in a connotative sense, we say it's a God's own country. ദൈവത്തിന്റെ സ്വന്തം നാട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ലിറ്ററൽ അർത്ഥത്തിൽ എടുക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല, കാരണം ദൈവത്തിന്റെ നാട് നമ്മൾ ആരും കണ്ടിട്ടില്ല. അപ്പോൾ ദൈവത്തിന്റെ നാട് എന്ന് വിളിക്കുന്നത് കൊണോട്ടേറ്റീവ്, സജസ്റ്റീവ് മീനിങ് ആണ്. ദൈവത്തിന്റെ ഒരു നാട് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നെങ്കിൽ അതെങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടാവുമായിരുന്നു എന്നാണ് നമ്മൾ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. സോ എവ്രി വേർഡ്, every text has a dictionary meaning as well as a suggestive meaning. Ambiguity definitely arises. Ambiguity is confusion. It arises when you don't understand or you are not very sure whether this particular expression means this or that. അതാണോ ഇതാണോ എന്ന് അറിയാത്ത സമയത്താണ് നമുക്ക് ambiguity ഉണ്ടാകും. നേരത്തെ ambiguity was a fault in style. Earlier critics or earlier generation believed that ambiguity was a fault. സാഹിത്യത്തിൽ ഒരു തെറ്റാണ് ambiguity. Ambiguity ഉണ്ടാവാൻ പാടില്ല. നമ്മളെപ്പോഴും പറയും സംസാരിക്കുമ്പോൾ ambiguity ഉണ്ടാവാൻ പാടില്ല, കൺഫ്യൂഷൻ ഇല്ലാതെ സംസാരിക്കാൻ പറ്റണം. ambiguity അല്ലെ സംശയിക്കുന്ന തരത്തിൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ തെറ്റിദ്ധരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു തരത്തിൽ സംസാരിച്ചാൽ അത് തെറ്റായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ കാണുന്നു, അല്ലെ ഒരു ഫോൾട്ട് ആയിട്ടാണ് കുറവായിട്ടാണ് കാണുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് എംസൺ argued that it is not a fault in style, but it is an essential virtue of literature. അത് virtue ആണ്. നിങ്ങൾ പറയുന്നത് എഴുത്തുകാരൻ്റെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ടെക്സ്റ്റ് നിങ്ങളോട് ഒരു കാര്യം പറയുമ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മനസ്സിലായിട്ടില്ല എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അത് അതിൻ്റെ മഹിമയാണ്, അതിൻ്റെ കുറവല്ല എന്നാണ്. So it is not a fault in style, but an essential virtue. Poetry is more ambiguous than prose by nature. That also Emerson argues. That more than prose, poetry is more ambiguous. Naturally, poetry is more condensed. So it is definitely more ambiguous. So if a poem generates 2 or 3 meanings, there is confusion, there is ambiguity. So Emerson argues that it is ideal that a poem generate more than one sense. And there are 7 types of ambiguity I've listed. I'll just explain 2 and maybe leave the rest to you. First type of ambiguity is a metaphor. That when 2 things are said to be like, which has different properties. For example, I can give you a very simple metaphor. My love is like a red rose. Simple metaphor. But you don't know what exactly is to be compared between love and red rose. Is it the color? Is it the fragrance? Is it the way in which the rose is blown or blossomed? Or is it the entire rose with its stem? Or maybe the entire plant of rose? So where exactly your comparison has to begin, where exactly the comparison has to come to an end, you never know. Right? Achilles rushed down like a lion. Simple simile. There is no confusion. Once I use a simile, there is no. If I say that my love is like a red rose, it is quite obvious because you can have one-to-one correspondence. But if I use a metaphor, Achilles the lion rushed down. Instead of saying Achilles rushed down like a lion, I use a metaphor and say that Achilles the lion rushed down. So you don't know what are the qualities of lion is attributed to Achilles. Whereas if it is a simile, Achilles rushed down like a lion because the rushing of lion and rushing of Achilles is compared. Whereas Achilles the lion rushed down, you are not very sure whether what are the qualities attributed to Achilles is valid to lion or vice versa. And second ambiguity, 2 or more meanings are resolved into one. You use one same word for 2 different ideas. And you don't know how this same word fits into both the contexts. Emerson characterizes this by using 2 different metaphors at once. If I use one particular expression for both, meaning if a particular expression has a dual meaning or the same meaning or the same word applies with the different meaning to different people, there the second ambiguity arises. You have a one word, but it appeals to be or it appears to be different to different readers. Then there is another type of ambiguity. So he lists out all the 4 I've listed here, and the 3 again I've listed in my next slide, but you see. You can just go through and understand how the ambiguity is just a confusion or maybe uncertainty as to which meaning it carries. Especially this is true because new criticism does not seek the support of outside information. That is a problem. If you take it, for example, if you have only the text with you, then there is a confusion, definitely. But if you take into account the author, his time, socio-political menu, I think many of these puzzles or many of these confusions will be sorted out. But if you don't take or if you keep the author and the time at abeyance, then naturally this particular ambiguity prevails. Next is paradox. I've given a big list on my left side. You can read that, take a screenshot. Derived from the Greek word paradoxin, meaning contradictory, contrary to expectations, unexpected or different, existing belief or perceived opinion, contrary to something established. Paradox is something opposite of what is actually accepted. It's an established device in literature, especially poetry, which juxtaposes, place side by side, placing side by side seemingly contradictory ideas for the sake of striking exposition and unexpected insight. That is what Clean Brooks has cited. I think the quotation comes to an end with insight. I forgot to put the unquote mark. So you understand that in after insight, it ends. And Brooks actually analyzes Keats's Ode on Aggression, especially the first line. If you're familiar with the poem, I'll just quote the first line. It begins with, "Thou unravished bride of quietness." So, unravished bride is the example of paradox that Keats, used. Seems to be taken as an example by Glenn Brooks. If you're not familiar with the poem, read that poem. Or maybe Shelley's Ode to West Wind. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Again, paradoxical expression. If you're familiar with any of these poems, you can take that as an example. Glenn Brooks advocated paradox as a method of close analysis or close reading. So Brooks is a writer who used this particular terminology, paradox, and Emerson used the word ambiguity. The language of paradox in that is a essay by Brooks in Modern Poetry and the Tradition, published in 39, and another very significant work, The Well-Wrought Urn, published in 47, established Brooks as a prominent new critic. And language of paradox is an analysis of Keats's poem Ode on Aggression. Language of poetry is the language of paradox. This is a statement that he has made. So you need to quote certain things, and if you're good in remembering certain expressions together, this is one of such expression you can quote. Language of poetry is the language of paradox. That is Brooks. He extended the meaning and scope of paradox to other works as well. Referential language cannot serve it the interest of poetry, hence paradox is inherent. Referential language is scientific language. So science can never have paradoxical statement. Science has to be very clear. LHS is equal to RHS at the end. But only poetry can carry paradoxes in it, because poetry can accommodate ambiguity, paradox, and even irony that we are going to look at next. Irony is the understatement, the difference between the literal and implied meaning. Understatement. If I say you are very good in studies, it's a positive statement, naturally. But if I say that to somebody who you and I know is a very below average student, then my positive statement turns out to be an understatement. Because you understand this is an understatement only when you understand the situation. Without the situation, without the identity of the person, you will never understand whether my statement is an understatement or a positive statement. It is a difference between what is literal and what is implied, right? New criticism believed that irony is used by writers as the language has been exhausted and corrupted. The ordinary language cannot generate more than what it is capable of. So you strengthen the language, or you maybe stretch the language to its limits by using devices like irony. Irony is an integral part of the text. Irony as a principle of structure, says Brooks. It can express things refreshingly and innovatively. Robert Penmorin believes that poets use the device of irony to incorporate contradictory ideas and meanings into the text. Only by incorporating irony, you can express contradictory, paradoxical kind of a statement, even ambiguity. Poems cannot be pure, as Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is a very major writer in America. He believed that poetry is very pure. It is not pure as they contain impurities like irony rather deliberately. That is New Critics' belief. New Critics challenged Edgar Allan Poe and his statement that poetry is pure. It is not pure because it contains impurities like irony, which is used by writers deliberately to stretch the language beyond the limits of its meaning. And there are three more points we need to discuss. One is tension. Tension is the interaction and consequent balance of different elements in the poem. That is, New criticism attributed the tension present in poetry to different meaning-making elements like ambiguity, paradox, metaphor, etc. Meaning, tension is the kind of gravitation or gravity that a text or a word can carry. I mean, a very ordinary word like never. In Othello, he uses the word never, 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 five times. And in uh, Conrad's, Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, a particular character dies with the last words, the horror, which is again quoted by T.S. Eliot in Wasteland. So, tension, language normally does not carry any tension, but you can tense the language by attributing ambiguity, paradox, and metaphor and make it strengthen. The term used by Alan Tate. Alan Tate is a person who actually put forth the concept of tension in poetry to denote the totality of literal and latent meaning in the poem. Literal meaning is apparent, denotative meaning, dictionary meaning. Latent is the suggestive meaning. Extension is one word he uses. You have to be particularly aware of this particular expression. Extension or external meaning, and intention, the metaphorical meaning. So he makes a distinction between extension and intention. Extension is a dictionary meaning, intention is a metaphorical, figurative meaning. They often coexist in a poem, enriching its total meaning. So tension is, this is what is meant by tension, but used by Alan Tate in his work. Then two fallacies. Intentional fallacy one. That is the term, fallacy is a wrong way of judgment, wrong method of judgment. Fallacy, intentional fallacy, is a term introduced by Wimsatt and Beardsley. These names you have to be very familiar with, Wimsatt and Beardsley, in the essay with the same title in Verbal Icon, published in 54. To denote the common practice of literary criticism to try to know the intention of the author as part of the evaluation of the text. So initially, if you teach Wordsworth's poem, Tintin Lines, or maybe Solitary Reaper, what we tell our student first is, when writing this poem, Wordsworth thought it like this, or this is Wordsworth thinking. So you evaluate a text, you evaluate a poem, or even try to interpret a text by looking at or by taking into account the intention of the author, what the author has actually intended. So without saying, you are very sure that new critics rejected the authorial perspective. So they said it's a fallacy, it's a wrong method of judgment. New critics who profess the direct and concentrated approach to the text considered it as a wrong method, a fallacy. Text, not the exclusive property of the author. Text has no relation with its author. The moment the text is born, the author has to actually die. This is a later criticism, actually. So the intention of the author is unwarranted. So you should not pay attention to the intention of the author, as the author has no other supremacy over the text. The text is everything. So you do not consider the intention of the author. Then there is another fallacy called effective fallacy, again used by Wimsatt and Beardsley in the same book with the same title. So they have written two very significant essays. Intentional fallacy, one essay, effective fallacy, another essay. Both are published in Verbal Icon. It is defined as an error in criticism. Again, a fallacy is an error in criticism, error in judgment, concentrating on the effect the work of literature has on the author. If you cry responding to a particular book, you cannot say that book is good because it made you cry, right? Okay, or emotionally respond to it. Concerned with gauging the emotional experience rendered by literary work, the confusion between the poem and its result, what it is and what it does. The emotion aroused by a work of literature is the effect of its internal organization of meaning, which is to be analyzed and inspected, not the emotion that is generated on the reader. If you're emotionally moved by a particular text, emotionally moved by a particular text, that doesn't mean the text is great because it just happened to move you. I'll give you two more examples of both cases. Intentional fallacy example. I have read Fitzgerald's diaries, so I know what The Great Gatsby is all about. Great Gatsby is a great work by Edward Fitzgerald. And once you read the diaries of Fitzgerald, that doesn't mean you understand Great Gatsby better, because diaries is personal account and novel is something different. Effective fallacy. I respond to Baba in Kite Runner. Khalid Hosseini's very significant novel, Kite Runner, based on how I feel about my own dad. Suddenly, I am reminded of my dad when I read about Baba. I think I've correctly analyzed the character because he has so close similarity with my dad. I think I have understood the text well. No, that is not a valid statement because you may understand your father. That's a different thing. But analyzing a text by identifying a character with somebody you know in personal life, that is called effective fallacy. So these two are wrong methods as far as these writers are concerned. I've just given you on my left small slides, which also you can perhaps read and understand. Moving to questions, I have 15 questions here, which you can just quickly glance through, take a screenshot as well. All the questions you find answers in my slides earlier, or you can listen to this video again. And there are 21 questions I have framed on short question and paragraph questions. Definitely, there will be essay questions, which we'll be discussing at the end. Major essay questions we'll be discussing at the end. Okay, hope you have gone through, taken a screenshot. Thank you. That's all for today. Over to you, Dr. Premanand.
So you've heard Dr. Prasanth. If you ask me, almost every single section of what Dr. Prasanth has said today is important. Ambiguity, paradox, irony. I mean, these tension, intentional fallacy, effective fallacy. These are all things that will definitely be asked for your examination. So it is imperative that you study. It is compulsory that you study and start your revision now itself, because everything, exams and all, are going to be set very soon. So till tomorrow, 8:10. Bye.